your book, that's what I'm saying,
That's
you know?
impressive.
So I picked two things to read to you tonight. But first of all, thank you to the Corinthians Yacht Club. I just think I know you're my kindred spirits because you explore the coastal places that we're so lucky to live next to and nearby. And I think the fact that we are in Bellingham, which is just kind of at the northern end of the Salish Sea, and then it goes all the way up inside Vancouver Island, even on the outside of Vancouver Island. You can keep on going through British Columbia, through all the Yakulta Rapids and all the rest of the places, or you could go through Seymour Narrows, you could choose that one too. But then you get up above that, and oh my gosh, I feel like when I get above Vancouver Island, it's like my chin hairs start to grow, and my antenna, and I start to become my more attuned to nature self, because I'm not the top predator anymore. And I really like that feeling. It wakes me up. So I want to say thank you again to all our relatives, mountain to sea. And let me just move forward here. So I always think of this quote. It says Walt, but it's Walt Whitman. Now I know the secret of growing the best of people. It's to live in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth. And I think that's very much why I love to be out in my kayak or in a boat on the coast. So my foraging, I didn't plan to be a foraging teacher or a wild food specialist, but when I was a kid, my dad would take us places and he would eat what the locals eat. So if we were in Maine, we harvested blueberries. If we were here, and we lived in Wisconsin, he was a welding teacher. He had the summers off. One summer he would weld and get all the money for us to travel the next summer. And so we were never in debt. So we went down to Guatemala in our Volkswagen Bug, and we went up to the Yukon in our Volkswagen Bug, and we went here to the Seattle World's Fair in our VW bus. And so here we are. This is a bit of a sad picture because actually my mother died in an auto accident on a family vacation in 1959 when I was 10 months old. So my dad raised us, and he raised us to, like he had raised the kids that were older than me, to love being outside, to camp, to look around, appreciate birds and plants and all of those kinds of things. So there I am sucking my thumb under a cabbage leaf umbrella. But I was enchanted on this trip. We were out at the Hoh Rainforest, and I went off by myself at 3.5, and I stood in front of these huge trees with that moss, and I could still see them dripping pearls of rain. And I was so enchanted that when I learned that there was a school out here, and I saw a poster with big trees and it said Huxley College of the Environment, I was like, that's where I'm going. And I left Wisconsin. So this place stole my heart when I was quite young. So way would lead on to way, and when I was at the college here, I met a fella, Gene Myers, and we became a couple, and he made me a kayak out of scrap parts. And we had another friend that made a trimaran sailboat in a high school shop class. And when it got too big, it had to be built outside. But he said, I want to test this thing, and I need some people. So we're like, I'll go. I've had one class in marine biology. I'll be the marine biologist. So I went with 4 guys. We went up the inside passage, and we took no food. That was the key. We were not going to, we said, what do we want to do? We want to forage. So we had an ethnobotanist, Alan, that saved our butt, or we would have starved. He could recognize things and tell us what to eat, what not to eat. And we did a lot of fishing. But here I am eating barnacles. So this is horse barnacles. And I don't put this in my book. It's a starvation food, but they taste like shrimp. And you can collect the rocks with the horse barnacles, put them in the fire or a pot, and then they open up and you can knock that little volcano-like calcium tent off the rock and flip it upside down and push your little finger through what would have been the top of the volcano, and out comes a plug of shrimp. So we ate a lot of sea urchins. We ate lots of these. These are up right now. This is the thimbleberry shoot. It's very treasured among First Nations and tribes. So on this trip, we also wanted to be visiting some villages if we could and not be a pest, but we would be invited into these villages and some of the elders would teach us about nori and other things. And I was headed to law school at this point, but that all derailed. I was like, that's it, I wanna stay on this coast, I wanna learn about this coast, I don't know how I'm gonna work this out, I don't know how I'm gonna get paid, I don't know what my career is gonna be, but I am not going to law school. So, this is where this trip really changed my life. And so today I still continue. I had a kayak company for about 10 years. I sold that, worked for it, and I still work as a guide up in Alaska and will until I can't do it anymore. I just love it so much. And from this kind of lifestyle, I ended up going up the Inside Passage solo and wrote a book about that because when I was on that trip eating barnacles, and it was the last day just about in the Octopus Islands, I just had this kind of like intuitive like dream that this voice kind of surrounded me coming up from the water that said, you need to come back and do this alone. I was like, I killed myself. Are you kidding me? I'm such a greenhorn, I'd kill myself. And then it was like, and you're gonna write a book about it. I was like, write a book about it? I just started studying with Annie Dillard, but I'm a really crappy writer, you know? So suffice it to say, all these like fears were one by one kind of dealt with, and I was able to do some of these things I really wanted to do, and now it's a big part of my life, the wild food, the coast, etc. And I teach up at Western. Here's my class. We were testing a lot of recipes with nettles on this day. I work for and with the tribal communities because we harvest seaweed together. That became one of those odd things that through all this coastal exploration, I ate a lot of seaweed. I read a lot of ethnobotanical little blips in books. I'd go through the Western Library and I'd find some ethnographic text from 1912, like Franz Boas and Hunt, and I would look up everything I could about seaweed, and I was just like voracious for that kind of thing. I don't know why, I just loved reading about that kind of thing. And so I collected this eclectic weird wisdom about seaweed, and eventually from all the travels in my kayak, I was asked to come and teach. And so with great humility, I come and I share what I know, knowledge sharing with tribes and First Nations, and I have a whole bunch of seaweed sisters, and they all asked me at one point to do a toxicology study. So I went back to graduate school at 50 years of age, and I studied seaweed toxicology. It was a 6.5-year slog. I thought I would be done in a year and a half. I came in with money and support and all that kind of stuff, and it just slayed me. But it also turned me into a very different kind of thinker about the world. I see a lot of the things that are invisible and think about them. I don't see them, I hear them in my mind. You know, oh, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, they're all over the streets now. We've had a big dry spell, and now there's like an alphabet soup of chemicals out there because we just had a big raid and it's August. That's how I think, okay? So I think, don't harvest your seaweed now. So that has shifted me.
You eat seaweed?
So
Do you?
here I was using my kayak to go and sample seaweed. I never thought that that kayak would earn me a master's degree, right? And yes, I still eat seaweed. I eat it breakfast to dessert. I had it this morning in my sea lettuce butter, for instance, on top of some toast with a wonderful nettle eggs that my husband made. So I just don't harvest in polluted places I would never harvest in Bellingham Bay. Forget that, okay? I wouldn't harvest in Post Point. I tested the seaweeds out there. Everything has PCBs in it, but everything in the sea just about that we're eating has PCBs in it. And so one of the things in the study that I was told to look at by a toxicologist up in Vancouver, who, Dr. Peter Ross, he said, Jennifer, whatever you do, when you get these results, don't scare First Nations and tribes away from their traditional foods, because everything is contaminated. And you need to understand when you deliver your results, you have to talk about a slice of pizza, and then you need to talk about a portion of seaweed. And then you need to talk about the benefits of the seaweed, and then you need to talk about the lack of benefits in that pizza. But the PCBs will be higher in the pizza, I bet you, than the seaweed. And sure enough, that's the kind of stuff you find, is that fats from olive oil to butter are loaded with PCBs in a lot of places. But they're at low enough levels that the tradition, it's called the Total Dietary Study, tells you what they find in all these things in the markets. They take a shopping cart, they go down the aisle, they throw in Sara Lee cheesecake, some other cheesecake, and they check that for PCBs, for instance. So you can look all this kind of stuff up. So my point is, yeah, I eat seaweed, but I harvest it from places that are not going to have industrial legacy pilings and chemicals, or maybe another problem would be that there might be no cannery showing, but they dumped a lot of lead in that area, so you want to know about historical things you can't see. I don't harvest where there's a lot of houses because of leaky septic systems and hepatitis C. I think about a lot of current going through a bay, so there's a lot of movement. I harvest off the Strait of Juan de Fuca, the open coast, or straight off the strait, but I don't go in places that don't have much movement. I'm telling you way more than I ever was going to tell you. Okay. You can tell, I just got out of teaching at Western, right? So I'm like in that teacher mode. Yeah.
What is PCB?
PCBs is polychlorinated biphenol. PCBs are in every ocean. They are carried by wind and water. So the way that people realized they were really serious and problematic is back in the 70s, there was a big gathering of scientists that were circumpolar scientists all around the pole. And they were meeting to look at marine mammal research. And they realized that the marine mammals way up in this pristine area were full of PCBs because they are eating fish and accumulating more and more and more. And then they knew that there were lots of villages that had traditional hunting that were eating the seals, the whales, sea lions, walrus, all sorts of things. And so then they thought, we should check the people. And it turned out that the people in the circumpolar areas that were eating marine mammals were the most polluted people in the world. And it was serious stuff. And so that was how toxicology evolved to be human toxicology, was out of that awareness from those scientists during that particular symposium. And so we're very lucky, but it's a young science and it's very expensive. When I was doing this study, we checked 43 beaches all up and down the Salish Sea, from way up at Cape Mudge, which is up by Campbell River, all the way down to Squaxin Island, all the way out to the Pachidot, which are on the kind of northern side of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And we looked at all these different sites, and every sample of seaweed cost $1,700, $800 to look at 162 chemicals.
Wow.
So it's just cost prohibitive. So there's this wonderful study. It was published in PLOS One magazine, which is journal, an international journal, but no other studies have been coming up since then because it was a $90,000 study that people contributed to. Yeah.
Just on PCBs, they cause all kinds of human illnesses. They can cause cancers and immune dysfunction, reproductive problems, neurotoxicity. So they're very toxic.
And we created it.
Yes, and PCBs are a kind of, they really came to their glory during World War II because they can be added to oils that are lubricating machines, and they can allow a machine to run 24/7 and not overheat. And so one of the ways, during war production, there were lots of PCB recipes, and they were a saving grace. People thought, oh my gosh, we can actually run these machines 24/7. We'll win the war. We'll, put Hitler down. It was a really elevated and good thing, we thought. But we didn't understand toxicology at that point. And if it was understood after that, then it was buried after that. And so all sorts of transformers have been dumped in different places in the ocean out here, and transformers transform electricity, and they have PCBs in them. Caulking in old buildings has PCBs in it. It's used in lots of different things, but don't get all twerked about PCBs right now. What I want you to think about is that we have pollutants all over the world, and you just want to eat as clean as you can, a diet that's got variety, a lot of fruits and vegetables, get your proteins. You know, if you're cooking a salmon and you're eating the skin, yes, it might have little plastic particles in it, but salmon has all these other benefits, you know, so you have to think about the benefits. There's so many benefits to the wild foods. They're very nutrient dense oftentimes. You don't need to eat a lot of seaweed. Seaweed is like a spice. You think of it like something that adds flavor. And so you're not eating a plate of seaweed, you're eating it like one vegetable, for instance. Okay, can I go to another slide so you don't all fall asleep about PCBs? All right. So how can we forage for a future mountain to sea with all the things going on, invasive species, climate change that's bringing on more and long-lasting El Niños, more frequent storms, with more wave erosion on the coast, all these different things. How can we forage mountain to sea with those things in mind? And that's what this book that I wrote that I didn't want to write is about. And I'll say I didn't want to write it because the Mountaineers, I was just starting in another book that I put aside like 15 years and was a carrot on a stick when they called me again and said, will you write a foraging book? And I said, no, I can't. I've been in graduate school, I've had this carrot on a stick, thought it'd be a year and a half, now it's 6.5 years, I gotta work on that book. And they're like, well, if you were to write it, what would you put in it? And I was like, well, I'd talk about invasive species, I'd get more native voices, I'd make sure that we've got some of the latest science on some of these different species and how they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. And so then I told all the reasons that, again, that I didn't want to write the book, and the editor said, I want you to lean into that, and I want you to write those things. So that's what that book is. It is only possible because of all my students helped me do a lot of research, and I had a lot of support, so we could do it quickly. So, some of my support. Val Segrist, she's Muckleshoot. She's my seaweed sister. She's the one that said, do a seaweed study, and I'll get you access to the beaches here that are the Muckleshoot beaches on Vashon Island, and I'll get you access to all sorts of other beaches. So it's like, I'm just so grateful for these weird knowledge categories of seaweed that have opened up bridges that I could have never imagined. And over here, this is Jared Questanuxum Williams. He's a Cowichan chef, and he lives about halfway up Vancouver Island, and he works, he finished this job now, but he was working as a chef for the elders' kitchen of the Cowichan Nation. So 200 elders come together 5 meals a week for lunch, and they cook an amazing meal for the elders of traditional foods. And so he is an incredible visionary. And so I am very hopeful. When you hear Val, you look her up and you watch something online, she is a very hopeful person, because all of these traditions of food are being passed on to the next generations. Some of them are becoming scientists. Some of the people are becoming more teachers in the public schools as well as the traditional kind of teachings. So there's a lot of restoration going on. We are in the age of restoration, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here. So cultivating awareness of animals, plants, insects, learning about relationships, that is, to me, the key when you're foraging. So this bear is in a patch of something some of you may recognize. It's goose tongue. You know what that is? It's maritime plantain is another name for it. And the tide will come up and cover this area, and then it'll uncover it. It's a very salty, succulent, kind of almost tastes like salty romaine lettuce and celery mixed into one plant. And this bear also was traveling a little bit earlier through some of this area of the intertidal. So I'm now up on a ridge. Come on. Whoops. Let's back up on a ridge, and I've walked across that kind of like wet sand where the tracks were, and I'm harvesting huckleberries. And here they are, actually oval leaf blueberries. And so these berries, I know that the bears, when they are eating these, the studies out of British Columbia have shown that, first of all, bears have articulated lips. So I want you to pretend you're a bear and you're picking a berry. You don't have paws. So what do? You have to take your lips and kind of go, right? Pick a berry. Come on, everybody, pick a berry. Don't be proud, just be a bear. This helps you understand the science that's going to happen here. So the bear picks a berry. Now, if I was a forager and I came through and I high graded, I picked all the big clusters all over the place. I just went bush to bush and picked the big clusters. That's really great for me, but the bear comes along and now it has to spend more time using its articulated lips to grab a berry here, 2 berries there, go to another bush, berry here, berry there. The studies have shown that it's almost better to strip an entire bush and leave another bush untouched. That is a brand new study in the last couple of years out of British Columbia. Isn't that interesting? It's very different than we would otherwise think. And there's the poop. Oops, sorry. So, in understanding kind of relationships, there's some neat little stories. Over here on the far right, anybody know what bolete that is?
Yeah, king bolete.
Yeah, that's the king bolete. And the king bolete is revered by certain squirrels. Like the studies have shown up in Alaska, the red squirrel and the flying squirrel take these boletes and they run up the tree and they spear them in the branches and they dry them up there. And the spores waft on the wind all over the forest area there. Way different than if you're a bolete way down here dropping your spores, right? So another thing that the animals will do is they'll just eat these mushrooms and then they'll run across the log or the forest floor and they'll poop out little spore packets. So they carry the spores out farther into the forest. Just like we know that salmon is dragged by bears and otters and eagles and other animals deep into the forest, and that it's called, oh my gosh, what is it called? It's called marine-derived nitrogen, MDN. That is found way at the treetops now because the trees have been taking it up, and those trees are a long ways from the river sometimes because of these animals carrying this stuff out. So then you see morels here, golden morel. They've found now that grizzly bears in Yellowstone love to eat these, especially the females. They hammer the golden morel, the yellow morel. Why? Because they used to eat a lot of pine nuts that were in the white pine, but that is with climate change not doing so well. So they've shifted their diet to include more protein, again, because these are full of protein, but they're hammering the mushrooms instead of the pine nuts. So it's something to think about when you're out there, why you leave mushrooms. You don't get so excited that you get to go home and make this great morel dish or this wonderful bolete dish. You say, there's a lot of things that depend on this. I'm going to take just a small portion, and that's it. So I forage with that in mind all the time, thinking about who else eats this. Because they don't have an alternative to go to Costco or the Co-op or Fred Meyer's, all those places we might go. And seaweed. Sometimes people say, the seaweed, it's just washed up on the shore, it's just rotting up there. Oh yeah, it is making fertilizer. It is carrying all this potassium and nitrogen into the water that are going to help basically fertilize a lot of other things out in the water that need these things, including other kelps. But all these tiny little Sitka periwinkles are gonna get hammered by everything from oyster catchers to other birds that are passing through. They're gonna be hit by everything from eagles to Cooper's hawks. And so this kelp, it turns out, ends up, they can trace this, they can trace the fatty acid signature in bullwhip kelp into almost all the foods we eat out here. So it's in mussels, it's in halibut. Why? We'll talk about that in a minute, but my point is it's never wasted. So you don't want to think it's, I'll just grab it all, it's just sitting up here rotten. So nourishment mountain to sea. What tree is this?
Doug fir.
Yeah, it's a big Doug fir with really deep furrows. That, it sounds crazy, but that cork-like wood has been recorded a foot thick, which is just stunning because it's basically able to survive very large fires. I should say medium fires, but Douglas fir always has these wonderful little cones that have that mouse-like bract with the black legs and the tail. There's a whole story about that in the Great Fire, and the mice ran up and jumped into the cones. But the grand fir is another fir that is edible, and I'm showing you these because we'll get to how you use them in a minute. So the grand fir tastes extraordinary in sorbet, in cookies. One of my students made grand fir lemon bars 2 weeks ago. Another one made a grand fir meringue pie with lemon.
But you're just using the new shoots.
They were using I should say, they were using down branches and cutting, and this is what I taught them, you could take the down branches and cut the needles off. And they'll have a lot of resinous flavor with it. So with these ones, they have, grand fir has one row of needles that's longer, and then a shorter one above that. So when you're looking at the end of it, right, looking down the branch,
It's like a broken comb.
yeah, it's like a broken comb, but you'll see lower needles that are longer and the next one that's shorter, but it's up top. That's one way to recognize grand fir. It's also very shiny. Here it is making grand fir ice sorbet naturally. But Sitka spruce is another wonderful tree to gather the new growth from. And my indigenous friends, Elizabeth Campbell in particular, will use even the needles that are on the branch that are pointy, and she grinds them up really fine in her coffee grinder until they are a dust. And that's what you add to things for flavoring. So windfall tree gifts, that's how I get most of my needles. I wait till there's a big storm, I go out, I collect some branches, I cut the needles off, I put them in a container in the freezer, and they're good for 6 months, you know? You always leave the lead tip if you're getting new growth. So the new growth is just starting on our grand fir behind our house. It's got little tiny nubbins showing. But when you're harvesting these, you don't want to take the lead because the branch is trying to grow out. You want to take one of the side new growths, and you don't want to take both. Just take one or the other. And you walk around the tree and you take one or the other, one or the other. And this type of foraging is called as well the 1 in 20 rule, which is you take 1/20th of what you can reach on that tree, and you leave the rest. And that was a rule that was the New York Botanical Society, along with a professor down at University of Oregon, figured out how if there were 20 species of 20 nettles growing in an area, stinging nettles, and you wanted to dig one up because you wanted to plant nettles, you would dig one plant. If there were 15, you wouldn't because there's not enough genetic diversity. If you're harvesting, you think the same thing for tree parts. And so where I work up in Gustavus, Alaska, there was a big kind of like offer from one of the local breweries to harvest the spruce tips for beer. And the breweries wanted these. So they paid the kids a certain amount per pound, and the kids went and grabbed every bit of growth they could reach. And the trees, after doing this for a couple years, look like apple cores at the bottom because they've taken all the new growth. Does that make sense? The rest of the tree kept growing out. So they fixed that, and now they don't look like apple cores anymore. Grand fir, Doug fir, spruce tip tea is wonderful with honey and lemon. It's got a lot of vitamin C. People like Captain Cook in Vancouver all made beer using spruce because it was basically prevented scurvy. It had enough vitamin C in it. And here I am with my grandboy and boys, and we're making some cookies, and we're basically pulverizing them, like I said. See that? Value Village grinder. We mixed it into the shortbread with my friend Elizabeth Campbell's recipe. She's Spokane tribe, and made these wonderful cookies. So I have her recipe, which is just really wonderful. You mix it with the sugar. That's the key. You know, you take that needles and you put it with the sugar gets infused, and it's got all the green throughout. It's really pretty, and you can put it in any number of things. Harvest what is plentiful. This is something Val taught me. Harvest what's plentiful. When things aren't plentiful, we don't go for a lot of huckleberries. We go for just a few huckleberries, and we get the rest at the farmer's market. Or if, you know, Saskatoon berry's doing good, we harvest that one, more of that. So they switch their harvesting based on what's plentiful. One thing that's very plentiful is up in the clear cuts. Anybody know what that would be?
Bracken fern?
Fireweed. Fireweed shoots. Fireweed is like, I just can't tell you, I am so impressed by fireweed. So fireweed, the entire thing is edible. You can take and collect the sprouts, say they're like as tall as your hand, and they should snap, not bend when you go to pick them, because if they're bending, they're already getting too much fiber. If they snap like asparagus, you know when you got asparagus and you're taking the parts off that are too woody, you want to hear the snap. So that's what you're doing here. Then you can use it. One of my students just made, they have to make a wild food dish for the class, right? They have to go harvest something sustainable, and then they have to make the dish. So one of them just made some really nice tempura. It was just these dipped in a tempura batter, and they held the batter really nicely because of the way the leaves are. But I pickle them too, and I also just chop them up and use them like asparagus. They have a little bit of an okra type viscosity, and they're a little bit bitter because of the leaves. And they're an acquired taste, okay? So you don't want to go, oh, well, that doesn't taste like asparagus. It tastes like fireweed, okay? So you'll just have to go try it out. So here they are. I'm processing them here, and I'm taking all the leaves off. And the leaves are used for tea. So this was something taught to me by a friend up in Alaska who had very many wonderful Russian women friends that were elders in Sitka. And they said, Ivan chai, we're making Ivan chai. And that is a tea that precedes the whole tea trade with England. Ivan chai was harvested and made all the way around the circumpolar area, in particular in the area of Russia. And it's also called bay willow, but it's fireweed. And the leaves, you just cut them off or clip them off. You let them wilt, like just for a couple hours. And then they roll better, because otherwise the stem is too hard and it doesn't want to roll up. And you put the leaf, the end toward your thumb, and you roll in a circle. I can't quite do it, but you're making a tea pearl. You're going like this. Okay? And that little end ends up inside the leaf. So then you let that ferment, like sit out for just a little bit, and the flavor changes. And then you let it dry, and you can let it sit in your cabinet in a jar for 3 months. The flavor will only get better. But I can't tell you enough how nice Ivan chai is, and it's full of antioxidants. And if you harvest the leaves after the plant blooms, they're the highest in antioxidants. Eat a lot of weedy greens. So this one we looked at earlier. It's the thimbleberry shoot. It's just coming up. It's the brand new growth. And you snap that off, like there's big adults here and there, and then there'll be some little ones down below. And that's what you snap off. You peel it, and it's like sweet cucumber inside. And it was a treasured gift. These were given, if you were in love with someone, you would give them a big bundle of these. That would be like, bringing someone chocolates at Valentine's Day. Eat weeds and invasives in particular, but carefully. So anybody know what this is? It's a nasty one. It's Japanese knotweed, and I was very hesitant to put this in the book. My best friend, Katie Beck, is a rare plants botanist, and we talked about this for hours of hikes over probably an entire 3 months. The benefits, the disadvantages of putting it in there, and we finally came to the conclusion that it's good to tell people how terrible this stuff is and educate people. And one way you can do that, and that's what I feel kind of wild food can be. It can be a portal into a world of caretaking if you teach it in a way that helps plants. And this is really problematic, Japanese knotweed, along the Nooksack River. Beaches are just filled with these bamboo-like structures that then die at the end of the year, and they break off and they go down the stream and they make a little dam, and then the water starts to work away at the sand on one side of that dam. It destroys salmon habitat, it poisons the soil. There was one homestead in the Olympic Peninsula that had some of this planted, and a little shred went down the river, and it just, over the life of the homestead, it basically covered big parts of this river system, And so now they've pulled most of that out. So when you're harvesting this, you can't drop a schnibble. You should put it right in a bag. But it is rhubarb. It's rhubarb that you can cook into a jam. You could cook it into custard rhubarb pie. And the key thing is, when you get the scraps, you can't compost them. And I talk all about this. It's one of the most invasive species in the world. It's really bad. It's like, and that's why we were so hesitant, but at the same time, to have an opportunity to talk about it was important. And so even a 2 millimeter little smidgen in the bamboo-like structure, you know how bamboo has straightness and then it has a little joint and then straightness and a joint. The joint is the area that sprouts. So if you drop a little of that joint as you're carrying that to the car, you could create a forest of this stuff. So that's how careful you have to be. But it has resveratrol in it. The Japanese have, it grows in Japan, it has predator, like insects and birds and other things that eat it. We don't have those. But it is called the anti-inflammatory plant there. It's very good for you. So that's another benefit. It actually has really important chemicals that are good.
How do you dispose of it then?
So how do you dispose of it? You would take it and put it in a double plastic bag in your garbage. You would put it in your little nuke, which is your, we call it our little nuclear thing. It's our microwave oven.
Oh.
You put it in the microwave and zap it until it's mush, okay? Just kill it. You could never, ever, ever compost it. Never just throw it in the garbage. You just want to double bag it. This is what they say on the kind of invasive species websites. Or you basically make it so it's never going to reproduce.
What does it look like? Just do you have a picture of it?
Yeah, I do in the book. And, it was
Okay.
one of those things that
That's fine.
last night when I was adding a few slides, I was like, you really should add one of these. And I could hear my husband saying, are you coming to sleep soon? So I did. But I would say, go ahead and open one of these and look up Japanese knotweed, and we're gonna mark it and you can pass it around. How's that?
Okay, I asked for it.
You asked for it.
You want it, Laurent?
So once you have the picture, put this in. Here. There's your marker.
Thank you.
Stand it up.
This is more than I asked for.
Yeah, see what happens when you get a good question. Okay, this is another nice weed to eat. Anybody know what this is?
Purslane or something like that, or what is it?
That's a good guess, but it's not quite purslane. It's sheep sorrel.
Oh, okay.
So sheep sorrel has a little, can you imagine a little sheep face over here? It's got these two ears.
Oh, yeah.
See the little ears? Long face looking at you.
Oh, cute.
That is sheep sorrel. And sheep sorrel is got a very lemony flavor. In the past, sorrel, and not even the past, the present, sorrel is made into a spring soup in Europe. It's a very common spring soup. So there's a recipe in the book, for instance, that's very much based on those, where you take a bunch of shallots, you saute them, and then the key is when you're making this soup is you take these leaves, you put them in a coffee grinder with butter, and you make the butter green and sorrel butter. Then you heat up whatever kind of calcium milk. It's really good to use cow milk because this is full of oxalic acid, which robs calcium, just like spinach is. And chocolate even has oxalic acid in it. So because of that, you make this spring sorrel soup and you put in milk, and that counteracts that. And the studies they've shown is that when you are doing that, you actually even almost get more calcium. So it's a wonderful thing. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for bringing the kiddos.
Oh,
No.
they love eating seaweed.
Yeah.
Lots of rockweed.
Lots of rockweed. Okay, so here we go. This is, we gotta speed up a little bit here. This one here is another lovely edible. It's chickweed.
Oh,
Chickweed.
yeah.
Chickweed, just to help you with identification. How many petals does that have?
3, right? 5, 6, can't tell. 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, 3. I can't tell. 6?
10.
1, 2, 3,
10?
4, 5.
It has 5 petals that have double petals to make a petal.
Oh.
So it has 10 kind of look-alike petals, but they're actually 5 sets of 2. They're like rabbit ears. Rabbit ears, rabbit ears, rabbit ears, rabbit ears, rabbit ears, okay? So that's one way you can identify this. The other is if you take chickweed and you hold it up to the light and you're looking at the stem, just the stem, you will see one row of hairs going all the way down the stem, like it has a mohawk. Okay, you got that? You got, like, this is your stem, and it's got hairs all the way down. That is chickweed. So you look for 5 petals that are actually 2 each, and you look for that hair, because there's other things that look like it, okay? So you put it in chimichurri, you put it in salads, it's wonderful. This is a plant that a lot of us might have in our lawn.
Yes.
What is it?
Dandelion.
No, it's not dandelion.
Something that looks like a dandelion.
It looks like a dandelion. This is hairy cat's ear. Hairy cat's ear.
Hairy cat's ear.
It was introduced. It's can be very problematic and take over like the landscape. I see it up on the grassy balds outside Friday Harbor Labs, and it just grows one next to the other, and it covers all the moss and kills it. But it's a very good edible. So if you can take the hair and not be too turned off by that, you think of it like a romaine lettuce. And it was used, I mean, this is one of those things that has been a survival food and a celebrated food. In Greece, they mix it into spanakopita recipes, the green. In times of war, when people can't even get to where their crops are because they might not make it back, this is harvested along roadways and countryside areas because it grows there. So it has actually helped people survive a lot. And you can eat the roots, you can eat the flower, you can eat the leaves. But the difference is it's got a little bit of a hair structure, it's got lobes, not teeth, and it's got a type of leaf that lays very flat to the ground, where a dandelion is like a funnel and it funnels the water toward the root. This one doesn't do that. There's a dandelion. See the lobes on that one? It's wavy. It's not
Wavy,
toothed.
Right.
It's wavy.
Because dandelion means lion's teeth in French.
Dandelion means tooth of the lion.
Right.
Dandelion.
Right.
And dandelions are the bee's magnet. There are so many insects that go and use dandelions for food. They're an extremely important plant. Before the orchards start blooming, where do the pollinators go? Dandelions. When the orchards stop blooming, where do the pollinators go? Dandelions. Dandelions feed, I could read you, but I think it's 83 insects, something like that, in here, all use dandelions. So don't think of them as a weed. We eat at our house roasted dandelion root in our morning drink every single day. It's got something in it called taxasterol. So Taraxacum officinale is the Latin name. Taraxasterol is the chemical that they was discovered in, I think it was 1912 or 21, I can't remember which one, but it modulates inflammation. And this is not woo-woo, this is like science. It's like these plants that we think of as nuisances have these amazing chemicals in their roots. And you dig them up and you slice them. My husband says I grow better dandelions than anything else in my garden. And it's true. I was just digging some the other day and we made roasted dandelion root ice cream. That was crazy good. It tastes like butterscotch. Now, you'll have to write me for that recipe because it's in another book that's out of print now, but I would be happy to give it to the club, okay?
I thought it was invasive as well.
It's introduced. So there's invasive,
Okay.
and that is got more severe characteristics where it outcompetes other species. It moves in very aggressively. Sometimes invasive species poison the soil, sometimes they don't. And even invasive species have all these different categories within them that the Invasive Species Board of Whatcom County categorizes them as. Good questions. So this is a wild pile salad from kind of our backyard and woods. I use dandelion too in kimchi. It's nice like that. Here's my husband with one of his champion roots. He was so proud of that, you know. So. And here he is chopping them up. And he's totally devoted to this, you know. It's just chops them up, then he puts them in the oven and he dries them, then he roasts them, and then he pulverizes them, and then that stuff is what we use. And you can put them in roasted dandelion root truffles. That is really nice too.
Get out of town.
I know, don't you love dandies now? Goodness gracious. So let's talk about seaweeds. Enjoy seaweeds sustainably. You've all heard this, when the tide is out, the table is set. That is said from down here all the way up into Tlingit country. And of course, when the tide goes out, there's a lot of critters that come down and feed. And this is a really skinny black bear in spring, right? It's come out of hibernation and it's looking for shore crabs and barnacles. And so it's walking along and it stops now and then and it rakes the barnacles around the seaweed and it licks its paw, because barnacles, as I said to you, are like shrimp. So it's like eating raw shrimp. And so you'll see its poop, and its poop will be just a pile of barnacle shells and some seaweed. But they aren't really eating the seaweed, they're going for the barnacles. But the point is, a lot of animals go out as well as us when the tide is out. And kelp research, this is kind of jumped in there, but one thing I want to tell you about kelp is it has the ability to grow near an oyster farm and de-acidify the water. So they did a big study at Hood Canal, and they have a oyster farm there, and they strung cables all throughout the farm with sugar kelp on it. And then they checked the acidity, they checked how the oysters were growing, and the trouble with that site is it has too much water flow, so it blows away the de-acidified water too quickly. But they found in some areas where there was a little less flow, they could see that the oysters grow bigger and faster and thicker shells. And so they knew that already, they were just trying to prove it again. So this is bullwhip kelp as it's biodegrading, and all these little beach hoppers are coming out of the sand. They got little burrows in the sand. It looks like someone stuck, chopstick or a skinny fat toothpick all over the place. But they're coming up and they're munching on this and they're pooping it out. This made all my students giggle today. Oh, they poop? I was like, yes, we all do.
Yes.
Anyhow, so they put out these little pellets, which are perfect fertilizers that wash out into the sea. So if it wasn't for all those beach hoppers, we would just have piles of kelp all over our beaches. And they've found now when seaweed rack, that's big piles of seaweed, are up on the beach, there are so many little other invertebrates that live in there. And they did a study up in Homer, Alaska, where they found thousands and thousands of invertebrates just in one pile of beach rack. So it's a very important place for like local tiny critters that birds are gonna eat. The law with seaweed is you need to leave any seaweed with fish eggs. And that's because the herring will come through and they'll lay their eggs on branches in the water, on seaweed, any number of things. So we want to promote the forage fish. And at the beach, I always tell people, once you harvest seaweed, take the time to rinse it, inspect it, remove critters, cut off tattered pieces, and then you go home and it's not a big thing to process. So one of the seaweeds that we have growing right out here at Lummi Island is sugar kelp, and it's being farmed. And it grows both in the wild and farmed, but it's important because it has something in it called mannitol. Mannitol is a sweetener. It's grown for mannitol all over the world, and it is diabetic friendly. It does not increase your glycemic index like sugar does. What threatens kelp and seaweed? We talked a little bit about that. I'm not going to go deep into that, but I will say warming water is the big one. Warming water, all of these seaweeds are cold water loving that we have around here. And so as the temperature goes up and we have like a layer of warm water on the surface, some of the reproductive capacity of the seaweed is reduced. Sometimes they just biodegrade, period. They can't take the heat. So warming seas are a big threat. So what do you need to harvest seaweed? Well, here's our little kit. So there is on this a scale. You need a spring scale. You're supposed to take that with you. You need a cutting implement. You could use kid scissors. That's what I like, because if you fall, you don't stab yourself. I use these kind of bags because the seaweed has a lot of air while I'm carrying it around and the bags are wet. And then I've got my seaweed license. You can take a maximum 10 pounds wet weight per day. You can't dry it and then weigh it. And other than that, let's talk about how to harvest. You always leave the holdfast. The holdfast is the anchor point that's holding onto the rock, and that's Washington law, Oregon law, Alaskan law, BC law. The holdfast is a condo of little invertebrates. It would look like not much to you, but it could be a kingdom for a baby octopus. And so some seaweeds, the holdfast regenerates a blade the next year. Most of them don't, but one of them where it does that is dulse. And this is dulse seaweed. Dulse. It's a red seaweed. Usually it's hand-shaped. That is so young, it's only finger-shaped right now. So here we are. This is some of the different seaweeds that people harvest out there. Winged kelp is the one on the left. This is a baby winged kelp. It doesn't have the wings yet. See those dragonfly wing structures at the bottom? That's the children. Here it is in dried form, just a cut of the blade. That blade grows 10 feet long. It's just like up higher than the ceiling. The next one is bullwhip kelp. I bet most of you know bullwhip kelp.
Yes.
The next one is giant kelp, which we don't have so much in the Salish Sea. It's out where it's higher salinity at the opening of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. It's out there. It needs higher salinity. And then those are all kelps. And all the kelps in general, except the one that's bullwhip kelp, have to be cut a foot above the holdfast. Because they don't want you to take the whole plant. They want to leave some of it for habitat and food. Bullwhip kelp has a special rule. With bullwhip kelp, you have to cut only the blades, and here's a tiny baby bullwhip kelp. I think I pressed that in like 1973 when I was, 1983, something like that, I should say. And bullwhip kelp, of course, this is kind of it when it's dried. And bullwhip kelp was also made into fishing line. This is just dried stipe or stem.
Wow.
It took a year for a fisher to make this into kelp line for fishing. They would massage all sorts of oils into it. Sea lion oil, deer tallow, they'd soak it in water, they'd stretch it, they'd do all sorts of processing things. And then one man might have 3 different lengths, and then when they went out fishing for halibut, you tied your length to your sons or your uncles, and you would bet that you would not want a lazy nephew that didn't do all the things to make that a perfect line, because you'd lose your halibut hook, everything. So anyways, with bullwhip kelp, and the men would cut it from live kelp. They dive down and they get really fresh kelp, and then they cut that into the line. And it could grow like 110 feet long. So that's the whole plant, or whole protist, I should say. My students would say, it's not a plant. Anyways, so
Do you
this,
cut the actual, I call it the whip part?
what's that? Yeah, you cut the whip part.
Okay.
And so they would take the part, down below. But when you're harvesting for food today, you can only cut the blades from a living one. And so you come along with your scissors, and I would not take all the blades, right? I would take part of the blades. So that should really be a half of a dotted line. But suffice it to say, 2 feet from the bulb, because this is called the meristematic tissue. That's a big word, meristem. But it means that it continues to divide. The cells keep dividing. Down here, these cells are fixed in place. They're not dividing. So if you cut it closer, it's never going to grow. Does that make sense? So you want to cut it in the growing area. That's why that law is 24 inches. And BC has the same thing. You can harvest the whole thing if it's washed up on the beach or if it's floating, okay? But even floating islands of kelp are habitats for fish and places for birds to land when they're going back and forth across wide areas. So let's go really fast here. Green, brown, red. This is the green seaweeds. You probably all know this one. It's sea lettuce. Anybody recognize that? Sea lettuce? Here it is here, sea lettuce. Sea lettuce, I just made a butter with scallions, sea lettuce, garlic. A chef down in Seattle, Baylor, makes a really nice sea lettuce sourdough bread. And it's kind of the parsley of the sea. The thing that a lot of these seaweeds have in them is a lot of fiber that's not digestible, which is really good because it slows down our digestion, and that's healthier for us.
Fiber.
So fiber is good, and these are loaded with fiber. And they have a lot of flavor when it's dried. When it's wet, my friend said it tastes like a plastic bag dipped in tamari. And then we have this one, which is fucus, old man's firecrackers, popweed, rockweed, and it is an apothecary of positive chemicals for you. So it's loaded again with anti-inflammatories, and it has a lot of iodine in it. So a lot of the tribal members, like 500 down in South Sound, were taking this for low thyroid instead of levothyroxine. It's used for enlarging prostate among the tribes, and it's used as a dietary supplement. And here's why. If you look here, you could see a little snail. See that tiny baby snail? It's not a baby snail, it's full grown, but it's a periwinkle snail, and it's eating the seaweed. And it would eat it out of house and home if that seaweed did not produce a chemical that is enzyme that shuts down the digestion process of the snail. It slows it down. And the snail, I wouldn't say it feels full, but it feels full, okay? And so that is a very common fasting tea, is bladderwrack tea now. So when I was on my solo kayaks and I'd pull into a campsite and I'd be like ravenous and I'd think, I can't even set up my tent, I'm so hungry. I'd make myself some bladderwrack tea while I was unloading the kayak. I'd drink that and then I was fine for about an hour. And then I could go ahead and get everything set up and then I'd eat. It's a wonderful sweet and sour type of vegetable if you want to add it, but it's very strong in flavor. Wing kelp. This is the one that I said grows like 10 feet. And this is what I was passing around. You dry it on a line like socks. I cut it up. I take the mid-vein rib out. I use that for salsa and other things that have a tooth. And I use the rest in soup. When you're eating or popcorn seasoning any number of things, one of my students just made a really nice Alaria brownie. I had it like 5 hours ago. So she took a recipe that I gave her from Holly B's Bakery on Lopez Island, and she added the dry seaweed to the brownie mix, and it was not even hardly noticeable, right? So you're adding it not necessarily for flavor, sometimes for the health benefits. And so that's where the fiber comes in. But there are other chemicals, I'm gonna get back to that. There are other chemicals, fluorotannin. Can you say that one, fluorotannin? Come on, try it, fluorotannin. Fluorotannin. That is like super anti-inflammatory. It's in all the brown seaweeds. Fucoidin, try that one. Fucoidin. Come on, fucoidin. Wake up your lips. Fucoidin. That is another amazing chemical that these are lower the risk for Alzheimer's. Yeah, now you're listening. This isn't woo-woo, this is scientific studies. So they lower the risk for Alzheimer's, they lower the risk for diabetes, they help people with diabetes, they are anti-inflammatory out the kazoo. They are anti-cancer. They're anti-cancer. So these seaweeds live in an environment that's one of the toughest environments on the planet. It's 6 hours of inundated water, underwater, then 6 hours outside in the desert, blowing winds, hot sun, salinity drops, and then it's 6 hours of high tide. That makes it so that they have to produce all sorts of chemicals that are antioxidants, so they can fluff up like a silk scarf and then dry up to a little crisp, then fluff up like a soft little, rabbit-eared shaped float like fucus, and then become dried again. So that's why they're so loaded. Help the bull kelp. It is not doing well in South Puget Sound. There are places where 90% of the kelp beds are gone, and that's because of a number of things. Warming seas create sometimes a blanket of water on the top, and down below where all the nutrient-rich water is, all the nutrients get eaten up by the kelp. They take it in through their holdfasts, their stipe, their blades, and then they starve. So kelp eats water through its whole body. And so another thing that's happening is they think the kelp crabs are kind of increasing in number, and they're clipping some of these off. They don't know yet. They're still studying this. We do not have the sea urchin problem that California has in the South Puget Sound and Mid Puget Sound. It's something different than that. But on the open coast of British Columbia and the open coast of California and parts of southern Oregon, the sea urchin is eating the kelp. Nori seaweed. This is the black gold of the coast, and here it is. This one is Porphyra abatei. It is the most treasured seaweed of all. And it is seaweed camp season right now. You can bet, as we're sitting here in this room, there are people in camps up on Dundas Island, up in Metlakatla area of Alaska, out of British Columbia, and they have their seaweed camps going, and the elders are there, and the youngers are there, and they're going out in boats to little rocks and areas where this seaweed grows for just a short amount of time, and then it's gone. And so they harvest it, they traditionally prepare it in all sorts of ways that not gonna go into right now because it'll take too long, but let's just say that this is up to 46% protein and it's very bioavailable. It might have only 35% of protein, depending. There's 21 species of this on our coast. It grows different times of the year. Even up in the Aleutian chain, it grows in the early spring, late winter, and it used to be harvested traditionally through the ice at low tide. So I use a lot of these as seasoning, and I put that seasoning in rice. I put that seasoning on popcorn. One of my other recipes I love to do, and it's sea bacon, and that dulse that went around is you take that dry dulse and you put it in a fry pan with some avocado oil and maybe some hippie dust, that's nutritional yeast, and a little bit of liquid smoke and a little bit of maple syrup, and you make sea bacon, and it crisps up, and it's like the best stuff. You cannot stop eating it. So I put that on a watermelon, avocado, scallion, feta salad with lime. So eat what's plentiful, delicious, and problematic. Purple sea urchin is just a harbinger of a problem down in, again, California and southern Oregon. The roe is 5 rows of lovely golden orange, and this is giant urchin. It's wonderful on pizza. Those are the tongues of the urchin that are on the inside. A traditional dish is uni carbonara. That is an Italian dish where you take the kind of tongues of urchin, the roe, and you put it with cream and butter and scallions in a pan, and then you cook your pasta, but not all the way, just so it's like al dente times 2, okay? Like it's still, you wouldn't serve it like that. And then you take and drain it, and then you put all that sauce with it and let it cook a little bit more and add fresh parsley on top and the best Parmesan in the city, not cheap Parmesan. And then of course there's clamming. And so, I'm gonna buzz through this because I think we are out of, we're running out of time, but there's a clam gun that leads us to razor clamming. How many of you razor clam? Now, or have anyways, yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do. Of course, out here at Birch Bay, these are my students, and we are digging, what do you think?
Horse clam.
Oh, you are so good, you're right,
What kind of clam?
horse clams,
Clams.
horse clams, here's a horse clam shell,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
It's called a gaper, too, it's one of the gapers, because it has this large hole where the neck comes out. Now for comparison, here's a smaller one, but this is a gooey duck. It's more rectangular. So it's past the gooey duck. Horse clams have sometimes a little pea crab, and it's hard to see, but there's the pea crab. And it lives inside the mantle. The mantle is that kind of white that you're seeing. That's the part that produces the shell, the mantle. And so those little pea crabs are in there, they clean up the mantle. Sometimes they irritate it a little bit too, but suffice it to say it's mostly symbiotic because they protect the clam a little bit. And so when you collect them and then you go to clean them, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? So it's good to clean them on the beach or nearby and then let those little crabs out so they can go find another horse clam, okay? Sometimes there's a male and a female in there. And here's a bucket of horse clams. You can see that big gaper hole again.
Oh, yeah.
I love horse clams. I just think they're wonderful. The siphon is great raw. You have to peel it. It's got a skin on it that's brown, and you basically put it in boiling water for just a quick little bit, pull it out again, and then unlike a gooey duck, which the skin peels off like a sock pretty easy, this peels off so-so and sticks now and then, and you have to use your knife to scrape it a little bit. But underneath there, that neck that is like abalone, basically. You could slice it real thin and have surimi, and you're just like, this is amazing. How did I not know about horse clams? And we got the little neck. So thank you, Corinthians Yacht Club. And this is a little bit of a schedule of where I'm gonna be in the future. I do a Salish seaweed course with North Cascade Institute. I'm gonna be at the Lummi Island Second Annual Seaweed Festival just May 23rd. That should be a fun thing, 10 a.m. to sunset at Lego Bay Road. And if you ever wanna go to Alaska, that's a wonderful thing. I hope you go yourselves though, you know.